Hi, this is Diana Everett Snyder here with the Canary Chronicles today. Now, while it's true that mainstream America has been unwilling to accept the inevitable possibility of a crisis situation, the truth is that in some form or another it is going to take place, and it's my belief that it's going to take place sooner rather than later, whether it's due to a national contamination of our food source, whether it's war, whether it's martial law, whether it's a natural disaster of some sort. The truth is that something's coming down the pike, and so my previous shows have really focused on explaining a little about the economy and what the dollar really is, its provenance, where it comes from. Of course, we've had to touch on war in Syria and the Middle East, politics and policies. But that's all very big picture, and of course it's not really going to impact you on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm going to be leaving off on all this politics and policies and stuff, because I do focus more exclusively on that over on my show over at Wide Awake News. So from now on, I think it's going to be my absolute pleasure to talk about independence and living the art of independence, and it is an art. However, before we launch into that show today, I'd like to address some of the comments that I've noted on my YouTube videos, and that goes sort of something like this. I know that my sessions are packed full of information. Yes, I have been made extremely aware of that by many different comments. Others have said that I could go slower or slow down. Well, that would be painful, and my dog would probably fall asleep. So no, I can't go slower. I could perhaps speak a little slower, but there's a lot to get through, and an hour is a pretty short period of time, even without commercials. You need to understand that while I'm not a doctor or a banker, and I'm certainly not a scientist or a politician, I am a research analyst, and I analyze research data. I study it, and I take all of that metadata into consideration when I generate really condensed analyses over a wide order of data and research, which I churn out into easier to understand papers for others to read. And often it's the very doctors, bankers, scientists, and even politicians on whose words so many seem to hang their hats who are on the receiving end of some of these papers and documents. Now, over the years, this has gotten more and more frustrating for people like myself, because less and less of the data is being recognized or even used as these specialists go about their days, their weeks, their years, or even fulfill the independent consult requirements, which are often mandated in their businesses and in corporations. Honest assessments and meaningful data outcomes are becoming really more and more obsolete. So essentially, I'm becoming obsolete out in the industry, because important decisions are being made without any nod at all to what the research indicates in terms of even a decent core trajectory. Policy is being mandated across medicine, science, agriculture, banking, and politics, not to mention social sciences, without any rigorous input from solid data at all. And by the way, most of the policies are being translated by lobbyists who have their own agendas. And so the result has been a complete absence of empirical evidence, data consideration, never mind common sense or the precautionary principle. There is no more adherence to the precautionary principle in any of the domains that touch your life on a daily basis. So myself and others like me have decided to bring our research directly to a platform where a general audience can listen in. We want you to disseminate the information and run with it, or not. If you feel as though it doesn't pertain to you, that's fine too. Remember that almost everything you hear on my show, for example, is easily available to you right now on the World Wide Web. For now, and I want to reiterate that, because there's a multiplicity of issues facing restrictions on the World Wide Web, from international consortiums, the Trans-Pacific Pact, discussions are looking at that. We have multiple senators who would love to really restrict your access to information on the World Wide Web. So right now, There's absolutely no excuse for ignorance, regardless of your paper qualifications or your skin color, or even your language preference or sexual orientation. The information is there, and it's up to you to go and find it. There's also, of course, no need to listen if you choose. The choice is yours. You can consider this a free public message if you care to. And you need to understand that I care. I care very deeply. I care very profoundly that the United States Constitution has been eroded for power and profit. Likewise, I'm concerned at the apathy that I see from people, legal groups, and the media. Yeah, the media is controlled. It doesn't take much to understand this. There's so much going on in the world, so many different issues, so many crises, so many human stories, and yet the news channels in the United States are absolutely dominated by the same dull clips with the same spin. It's the same faces, day after day after day. These are the journalists that Senator Feinstein would define as the legitimate News Corps. So what you should be asking is, or who you should be asking why the news is in the state that it is, are these legitimate news corps. Ask them why they don't collectively stand up and walk out. Ask them why they allow themselves to be bought one monthly salary at a time, to read the evening news, purged and sanitized by a plethora of hands, from legal aid to lobbyist aid to the White House aid. These legitimized journalists are enabling corruption across all disciplines, and in the resulting vacuum of honesty and factual reporting, a wealth of alternative media has sprung up, some with their own agendas and others not so much. I can't speak for them, but I can tell you what my agenda is. I have an agenda. Of course I have an agenda. Everyone has some form of agenda. My agenda is to get you thinking. My agenda is to get you questioning the status quo. My agenda is to get you to question the new normal. Look around. Is this normal? The way things are? Shouldn't you be looking at the way things might be or could be, and then how to get from here to there? My agenda is to make you aware that the prosperity paradigm is really an abundance of scarcity in which you and your children are a victim. That's right, you're a victim of prosperity. And prosperity at this level comes at an enormous price. And that price is freedom, liberty, individuality, and ultimately truth. Our current prosperity also brings food insecurity, by the way, which is going to be one of the very big focuses of the next couple shows. The prosperity paradigm also strips you of your inherent right to choose. It doesn't matter whether it's the right to choose raw milk, if that's your choice. It might not be, but wouldn't you think that it could be a choice? Your right to grow food, isn't that a choice? Shouldn't you have the right to grow the food that you want to put into your body? You should have a right to make informed medical decisions and choose the medical paradigm that fits your outlook on life. Your right to say no. All of these things. We have lost sight of who we were. We have lost sight of that which we were hardwired for, and we've forgotten our purpose. And our purpose sure as hell isn't to stand in line and maul each other for a 5G phone. So, on that note, this week I'm starting the How to Live a Real Life series. That's it, in a nutshell. This isn't about prepping for Armageddon or ISON or some other miscellaneous comet out there. This isn't about prepping for martial law. This is about preparing for and living independently. Because once you're truly living independently, disaster preparing becomes merely an extension of your independence, not so? Now, I do have notes. Of course I have notes. I'm a lecturer, I'm a teacher, I have notes. And I refer to them often, because otherwise it's simply too easy for me to get sidetracked into long rambling monologues on one thing or another. After all, I'm sitting here alone, except for the dog, a couple of cats, a few birds, who really don't care if I ramble on about anything of my choice for hours at a stretch. They're perfectly happy on my lap, at my feet, on their perch, and you are over there, and I can't see if you're incredibly interested in the particular point that I'm making, or if you're squirming around waiting for me to move on already. So now that I got all that off my chest, let's get on with preparing for independence. It's interesting, that Merriam-Webster classifies survivalism as an attitude, policy, or practice based on the primacy of survival as a value. And the New Oxford American Dictionary defines survivalism as the policy of trying to ensure one's own survival or that of one's social or national group. In the broad scheme of things, there are really 5 factors that lead to preparedness as a way of life. And those 5 factors that come to mind for me are time, money, health, attitude, and desire. Curiously, today, it takes a lot more money to get into the art of living independently than it did at any other time in our recent history. In the old days, we all lived independently, and it took money to move to cities and create new adventures. But in today's prosperity paradigm, setting yourselves up to be independent can be a fairly costly venture, and so we're going to look at some different ways around that. But one of the first ways that you can make decisions about money allocations is looking around at your life for those areas where you are spending money that you don't need to. And that would include things like Starbucks visits, fast food visits, dry cleaners, movie rentals, and then you can look at ongoing expenses that you have. Do you need the huge plan on your cell phone? Can you downgrade? Do you need that huge, do you need 300 channels to watch? I mean, really, who can possibly watch 300 channels? So those are areas where you can start whittling things down, and your kids do not need to be visiting video stores. They don't need to be visiting toy stores. This is a false prosperity paradigm, and your children are not better off for it. When you're looking at a life of independence, it has to be something that an entire family embraces. And I promise you, your children are probably going to hate you for the first little while that you start to unplug them from the sanitized, unhealthy lifestyle. But if you start by cutting out a particular show a week, and you put in entire blocks of TV-free time for the kids, for your spouse, even for yourself, you'll quickly get rid of all those urges to sit in front of the TV. I promise you. I have friends who started to unplug the kids and themselves from all the box entertainment, and they all saw sides to each other that they didn't believe were there in the first little while. Kids became monsters, spouses became unreasonable, but we've learned, we've been taught, we've been trained to come in, sit down, pick up the remote. The kids have been trained to sit down in front of Xboxes and view them as a very natural part of life when they really aren't. And once you remove all of those things, kids tend to go outside more. Kids tend to be more vested in the relationship, in the family. They are willing to read more. The same goes for your spouse, and if you look inside of yourself, you would find that that's true too. And this is not, a lecture on how to raise your family, but I am hoping to create an awareness that the way we are currently living is not good for us. It's not good for our minds. It's certainly not good for our bodies. It's not good for our relationships. And it's time to get up, get moving, and get living positively, which is that life of independence. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I am a mother and a grandmother, and I've been there, done that. So let's move on to health issues. Health considerations, of course, have more issues to them, and you're going to have to look at your own lives and the people that you need to be taking care of. If you have young children, small children, infants, toddlers, of course your needs are going to be different to a family that has teenagers who can get up and go on their own steam. They can carry things on their own. They can fulfill tasks that younger children can't. Of course, if you have your in-laws or your parents living with you or up the road from you or in the same neighborhood as you, these are considerations that you need to look at under the concept of health. Because, for instance, if there's a natural disaster, if you suddenly have flash floods, pushing down fences and invading basements, and your parents or your parents-in-law live in the same town, you might be facing a situation where, on two fronts, where you have to take care of things in your own home and potentially help the older members of your family with whatever's going on in their health. So it behoves everybody to really sit down and make decisions and encompass what it is that your family truly needs out of this experience. And then really, attitude and desire are sort of interchangeable in my mind, because you have to have a can-do attitude. You have to have an attitude of wanting to do better. So that, of course, is desire. You are desiring a change. You're desiring to move into a paradigm that's more closely aligned with who and what we are hardwired to be. So essentially, you have to have the motivation and the courage to prepare, because it's simply the right thing to do. And as you move further down this path and you stay with it, you're going to be rewarded with a peace of mind that comes in knowing that you have done the best that you can to take care of yourself and your loved ones. And it's a perpetuating, repeating cycle. This is not, I get really frustrated with people when they say, well, I got a little preparedness pack together. I went down to the grocery store and I stocked up on canned foods and I stocked up on bottled water. And so, bring on the crisis, bring on martial law. Oh, if that earthquake ever comes, I am so ready for it. Really? I mean, that's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. I mean, we can identify different crises that could happen. I think I've gone through a couple of those, but it's so much more than that. And how do you prepare for a month? And how do you know that it's going to be a month? Exactly 30 days? Did you see that somewhere? Is it written, carved in stone? No, it's not. So a prosperity paradigm is not the way to go. A life of independence paradigm is the only way to go. So yes, of course I'm going to talk about a survival pantry and an accumulation of extra food and water, but this is a part of the ongoing lifestyle. This is not a, stamped, signed for 10 days or stamped, signed for 30 days. It's preposterous. Some of the things that you do need to do, of course, is assess the risks and threats that are unique to your area. There's a lot of websites, and there are some government websites that you can go to, and you can plug in your location, and it'll give you their recommended lists for. The Red Cross does this, FEMA does that too. List of requirements for things in your area if you are, for instance, in an earthquake-prone area, or a flash flood-prone area, or a wildfire-prone area. So you can go there to get a little bit of overview of what you need for a particular crisis. But we're not really going to focus so much on the crisis situation, because our current paradigm of lifestyle choice is an ongoing crisis that we have to move away from. So the next few talks are just going to be all about, moving away from that and into something infinitely better and more healthy for you, your family, the environment, and your future. Living a lifestyle of independence does require that you hone some skills that are not necessarily needed in our fast food paradigm. And of course we talk about them as survival skills, and under survival skills is making a fire, hunting or fishing. Really, survival? you eat every day, you drink every day, and if it's cold, you need to be warm every day. And yet, these are paradigm skill sets. No, these are everyday things that everyone should know at least the rudimentary skills and information about. So if you don't know about these things, may I suggest that you go to YouTube and you Google and look at some different YouTube videos, and there's some fantastic ones out there for kids too. I mean, I don't suggest you teach your kids to start fires and have them practicing in your front yard, but everyone should have at least a couple of flints and know how to use them. You need to understand exactly what's involved with starting a fire. You need a good thing to do is to save the dryer lint from your dryer, because as we get further down, you'll understand that you really shouldn't even be using your dryer all the time. But we're not going back to the backwoods here. You're living in suburbia. You have electricity. You have TVs, Xboxes. You have refrigerators. You have all that stuff. But you have a garden. And right now your garden is full of pretty little flowers that look good, and hopefully aren't being sprayed with Roundup. And then you get in your car and you drive down to the grocery store and you complain about the prices of the food, and then you hear on the news about the FDA and CDC recalls because the cilantro was tainted and the parsley was tainted and, God forbid, the melon was tainted, and then Costco's berries were tainted, when really, instead of all of these flowers in your yard, you could be utilizing a lot of that space and the time that you would have spent out there deadheading flowers and doing all of that, your time would be better spent growing foods of far, far higher quality than what you can get in the store, regardless of whether you buy, mainstream grocery store food or organic foods. A lot of organic foods is very questionable too. So this, of course, just boils down to this whole thing about understanding where you're going with this, examining your attitude and your direction, and once you and your family have sat down and really honed what it is that you require out of this, then you're ready to move forward and get to know your stuff. And here's where you're going to educate yourself, your kids, the spouse. You're going to practice doing this. You're going to practice some more, because all the planning and all the prepping of skill sets and all this setup in the world isn't going to help you if you don't get it to work naturellement. So really, this is going to help you to develop a meaningfully prepared mindset. And part of this is conquering fear, because we often, when a natural disaster or some other imminence happens, people don't realize how crippled by fear they become. And so if you already know that your pantry is full of food and foods are growing and you have seed that's going to self-perpetuate, and you understand the dynamics of collecting water, purifying water, and storing water, so much of your inherent fear is going to be dramatically diminished immediately without even conscious thought, that while others are still focusing on those immediate concerns, you will be ready to take command of the situation, which is an absolute boon to you, your family, and the people around you. So from now on, all your containers that come into the house, plastic containers like milk jugs, juice jugs, 2-liter soda bottles, which you need to cut back on, you're going to be cleaning them out and sterilizing them, and you're going to be filling them with water, and storing them. If you have a garage, you can store them in the garage, or you can store them under the bed. And I say this because I was actually, before I started recording the show, I was talking to a neighbor, and they have house guests, and she was complaining that, well, they use the spare bedroom to keep all their supplies, the emergency supplies, and so when they have out-of-town guests, things get really crowded, which has reminded me to talk a little bit about the excuses that people make. We are so good at making excuses. Well, I can't really live a life of independence because I live in an apartment, or I live in a duplex, or I live in the city, or I live with roommates, and all this kind of stuff. Well, so it's not impossible. It's just a little more challenging, and there's still plenty of things that you can do to live a more independent lifestyle. So plastic containers have their uses, not all, but some. Glass containers, so this is jam containers, those huge pickle jars. You can go to secondhand stores and you can look for canning jars and things like that. Those are useful for loose teas, loose herbs. You can store seeds in them. Make sure you label everything. And then, if something does happen, you have all of these glass containers which can be used not only for sterilizing water, but to store sterilized water so that you're not in a perpetual cycle of trying to sterilize water. You also need to find out where your animal feed stores are, your big sort of quasi-wholesale animal stores that sell bales of straw and things like that, because there's lots of things they sell in much larger quantities, a lot cheaper than you can get at health food stores. Things like diatomaceous earth, even things like hydrogen peroxide. Then you're definitely going to want to frequent the hardware store, a big hardware store where you can get at least a 50-pound bag of clean, screened sand, because come the time when you've got to start purifying water, for example, you can make your own filtration system using sand and then the wood charcoal bits left over at the bottom of a fire. The other thing you're going to do is go to big box grocery stores and all the stores that have a bakery department, because they get their icing sugars in huge buckets that are, yes, they're plastic, but they have very well-fitting lids, and it's food-grade plastic. And usually if you go to them and you ask them if they have any buckets with lids, be sure to specify lids, they're quite happy to give them to you at no cost. And if they don't have any right then, ask them when would be a good time for you to check back with them, and then go back and get some. These buckets come in a variety of sizes, and they're excellent for decanting huge bags of rice, huge bags of beans. And then, of course, you're going to go to a place like Costco or Sam's Club, and you're going to buy big 50-pound bags of rice, 50-pound bags of beans, of lentils, 50-pound bag of sugar, 50-pound bag of flour. When you buy in volume, you're buying cheaper. And then you can decant it into these buckets. Again, be sure you label your buckets. Make sure the lids are on properly, and you can stack them nicely and discreetly in a corner where they're there, out of sight, out of mind. And then in your kitchen, you can have smaller containers that you decant from those. You definitely want to stock up on hydrogen peroxide. Now, in the grocery stores, you can get 2 and 3% hydrogen peroxide, which is fine, but it's very diluted. It would be far better if you would find a source of food-grade hydrogen peroxide, 35%, and then you need to understand how to dilute that for different applications. This is good for killing any kinds of pathogens and bacteria in drinking water, although we're still going to go through some other sterilizing factors. When it's diluted properly, it's great for cleaning out wounds. It's great for gargling with. It's great for putting in children's ears and letting it foam and bubble and then having them drain it if they have an ear infection or if they have a cold or if they have allergies, because from allergies we get sinus infections, we get ear infections, and if something happens and the grid is down or you're in an emergency situation, you're not going to have access to pharmacies and doctors. So hydrogen peroxide is probably one of those things that should be at the absolute top of your list. And then there's something which you can incorporate right away, which is kind of fun, and it's an interesting test of how your family would survive in the event of some or another shit hitting the fan scenario, and that is to actually switch off the mains to the electricity to your house. So that way no one forgets and flips a light switch and has it go on, and then they go, oops, and turn it off. It's a very, very interesting experience. So choose a weekend day and decide that you're going to not use any electricity for 12 hours and see how it goes. And then you're going to go for a 24-hour period. And then perhaps the next weekend you can go for a 48-hour period where you just shut everything down and it doesn't work. Because what you notice is how quickly, once you are practicing a 48-hour or a 72-hour no electricity scenario in your house, what you notice is how very quickly everybody gets on a natural rhythm cycle. So you go to bed earlier because it's dark and there's no lights, and you wake up earlier because the sun's out, and if the sun isn't out, well, it is light out there. So I do encourage you to embrace the less tangible aspects of preparedness and consider the events of the day going on right now, all these different things that we hear are going on in different parts of the world, and questionable things going on here in the United States, as a wake-up call to get you going in the best and possible way moving forward, going on a life of independence. So I guess, this is just a really good time to explain to you that I've always lived a life of independence, and I've never really considered living a life any other way, because to my mind that would be giving up something inherent to myself. I grew up in South Africa. I grew up with my grandmother, and although we were by no means wealthy, we had an absolute abundance of food. And in those days, the political climate in South Africa was somewhat unstable, and although it still is, we really, everyone there really acclimated, and it wasn't even an acclimation, it truly was a way of life, and that way of life exists all around the world today. And so really the more forward-thinking and the more progressive a country is, and the more first world a country is, the more bereft the country is. So I stand back and I look at that and I go, well, would I really want to change what I have, a life of independence, for what the people around me have, which is a life of codependence and utter dependence on the grocery store, and having to jump in the car and go somewhere to go and get one item to make a meal. You open the cupboards and there's just nothing there, and I just could never, in my wildest dreams, my wildest nightmares, imagine a life like that. So really that's what this is about. My grandmother would trade honey, she would trade herbs, she made all kinds of herbal tinctures, lotions, oils, potions, soaps, and as a child, I followed her around and I watched what she was doing. She was never very good about handing down recipes, but I've developed my own over the years, and as an adult have found and honed those concepts, and with all the new information and all the products available to us now, my range and spectrum of what I'm able to provide at my house is amazing to some people, not amazing to me, and it's not going to be amazing to you because you're going to be doing it as well. So I'd really like to talk about aquaponic systems because although they've been around for quite a long time, they've only recently hit mainstream. And it's an unbelievable package deal, because when you use an aquaponic system, you're able to incorporate all the protein that you need in the form of fish. A good one to use, of course, is tilapia, because it's a sturdy fish. It doesn't require any particular kinds of equipment. They handle temperature fluctuations really well, and they're readily available. You can buy them online as little fingerlings, and you keep them in a separate container, and you just keep multiplying them. So you have two different containers, two 55-gallon drums that you put the fingerlings in, and then you have your aquaponic system in which the majority of your fish are housed, and then you have a filtration system, and then you start setting up your grow system. And remember that with a system like aquaponics, it's a very small area that is dedicated to the system, but the amount of food that you can produce in that size is quite astronomical. And a lot of people forget that when you grow aquaponically, just like when you grow hydroponically, while you can go vertically, you can go horizontally as well. One of the best things about an aquaponics system from an economic standpoint is that you're not putting out a whole lot of money to buy all this big fancy brand new equipment. Most of the forms of containers that you use to build a system like that can be gotten at a second-hand store or a second-hand hardware store or off of Craigslist. You can get huge food grade storage bins. I mean, they're huge. You get 350-gallon ones. You get 1,000-gallon ones. It's going to depend on your space. A garage works fine. A sunroom too. Even a sunny porch, so long as it's protected in the winter, and certainly over the summer it can be there. Even your filter systems and things like that, I see them all the time on Craigslist. And certainly as you start out, you can use the 55-gallon drums if they come with a lid, and you can cut them in half long ways. That way you can have 2 containers for your fingerlings right off the bat that cost you maybe $10. I'm in California. I see them on Craigslist all the time for $10, $15, $20. And if you're buying 2, 3, 4, 5, you often get a much better deal. For plastic plumbing pipe, if you don't want to, I mean, it's not that expensive, but you can certainly get it at the hardware store, where they will cut it into any length that you want if that's an issue for you. Or you can go out to the city dump. They actually have an area dedicated to all that kind of stuff, where you can pick up cheaper lumber, cheaper, all those kinds of things. I mean, pick your poison, they got it all over there. Only one word of caution when you're creating your aquaponic system is to make sure that after you've set it up with your gravel and everything, and I do recommend that you buy the gravel new, and that you wash it really, really, really well before you even put it in your system, and start to create the environment into which you're going to add your fish. I mean, I just can't tell you strongly enough how important it is to make sure that there is nothing on that gravel, because otherwise it doesn't matter what sort of environment you're going to create. The second you add the fish, they're going to kick the bucket. And then as your fish start multiplying, the second you see little babies, you're going to scoop them out with a fishing net and put them into a barrel, a habitat of their own, to allow them to get bigger before you put them into the main tank. So the whole thing with the aquaponics system is that you're growing fish which are going to provide you with your source of protein, and because they continue to multiply, you have a never-ending source, so long as you don't eat faster than they're able to reproduce, of course, naturally. An amazing thing about aquaponic systems is the fact that they take a lot of water up front to get your stuff growing and get going on your whole system. But once you're up and running, it requires very little additional water. It's not like a garden where you go out and you have to water everything, and then the sun comes out, and the next day you have to go out and you have to water everything. I mean, even if you mulch in a garden, there's still an inordinate amount of watering that needs to be done. Whereas with an aquaponic system, you're talking about, depending on the size of your system and your weather conditions, you're probably going to add the total of an inch in depth of water every couple weeks. In California, when it's 90 degrees for a week, I add less than an inch to my system. So you use a lot up front, and then after that you're pretty much set, and the fish aren't going to mind if the water dips down a little, and neither are the plants. You're just going to accommodate it. So it's actually possible to maintain an aquaponic system with water runoff from your winter rains. Of course, since Fukushima, you're probably going to have to do some filtering and do some stuff like that. If you want to get that into it, there are people that just want to live their lives and not get that uptight about the whole thing, and that's your choice. But I urge you to go and look into the whole aquaponic system. There's some great books about it. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, amazing YouTube videos that show you, some of them are really step-by-step videos that show you exactly how to set it up. and what sort of equipment you're going to need. And you don't need a whole lot of technical equipment. You don't need superhuman strength. What you do need is a dedicated space for it, and that can change between summer and winter. You can dismantle it, drain a lot of the water off into spare buckets, certainly enough to move the system to a more hospitable area for the changing season, and then just recreate it. You want to save that water because that's your fish's environment, and it's been conditioned to suit them. And the one thing about all fish, regardless, is they don't like too much changes in the habitat, the type of bacteria and things that are amenable for their living conditions. You also have to be realistic about the fact that not everything is going to grow in an aquaponics system, but certainly a vast array of produce. All your dark leafy greens are going to do extremely well. If you do an aerial system across the top of your aquaponics system, you can grow cabbages very well. Of course, they take a lot longer to grow, but you can incorporate a drip system in an overhead pipe into which you've drilled holes and half filled with gravel, and you can create an quite extraordinary habitat for cabbage. And I use cabbage as the perfect example because out of all of the dark leafy greens, that one is certainly the one that takes the most time to produce a good head of. And then you can do aerial pipes too for all your lettuces, all your spinach, all of that kind of stuff. And you can grow tomatoes year-round in buckets, in little baskets that you can make yourself. I mean, you can buy them in the store. It's good enough. But you can make them at home with florist moss and a little bag of charcoal. So if you go down to the pet food place, a pet food store, or an aquatic system, you can buy a container of charcoal, and you simply tuck a tablespoon or so of charcoal after you've washed it into a ball of moss, and then you can take an old pair of nylon pantyhose and put the moss and the charcoal into the bottom, tie it up into a little pocket, tie it off with an elastic, and then you simply repeat that so that you've got two layers of nylon hose, and then you're going to, very important, you have to put a rock in there. If you don't put a rock in there, you're going to have things that float too freely. That happened a couple times to us. The kids actually thought it was kind of funny. And then you just slit a hole in the nylon and tuck your little tomato starter in there. And at first, I actually had a piece of plastic mesh that I had strung across the top of the system to hold those little ballies in place until the plants were heavy enough that they could weigh themselves with the stone and stay upright. And the fish are very interested. They come over, but they're not going to eat anything. They're not going to eat the roots or anything. Oh, and that's the other thing. So you can have a system where your fish are completely separate, and your filtration system will filter the poopy water, so the fish habitat, through a system of hosing and up into your plants, and then from the plants, which eat all the poop and all the things that the fish have put in there, the nitrites and everything, and then the water goes down out of that plant housing system and is recycled back up to the fish as clean water. And of course then they re-pollute it, and then you start that whole filtration system again. Or you can do a system where you actually have some fish in the plant housing container. But I think maybe we shouldn't go there because it starts to get kind of complex. But I'm pretty sure that you'll figure it out if your intention is to live a life of independence. Some of the deciduous herbs like rosemary, of course, and even some of the sages are not amenable to growing in an aquaponic system. So for those, you need to have smaller tubs nearby. So while you're looking at all of this and deciding in what ways you are going to move forward and claim a life of independence, because it is really something you have to claim, something you have to take for yourself, because obviously no one's going to give it to you. But when you're in the process of doing that, and you drive out of your property or out of your apartment building, take a look around at all the landscaping that's out there. I mean, if you live in a residential area, chances are you are surrounded by all sorts of trees and shrubs and pretty looking things that really don't serve a useful purpose. There are very few suburbs that are older than or younger than 20 years that have apple trees or pear trees or cherry trees or anything that's useful in terms of food and feeding people in these rather strange neighborhoods. Of course, if you're in an apartment building, chances are there's nothing to eat growing out there unless you are a grass eater, which we're not. So this begs another question and a whole nother realm. If you live in a neighborhood and you're part of a homeowners association, there's a very high probability that you live in the clutches of a homeowners association that controls absolutely everything that you plant in, particularly in your front yard. Some homeowners associations are so controlling that they won't even let you grow anything in your backyard, particularly if it peeks over your fence. So even if you only grow tomatoes in your backyard, if the trellising for them can be seen over the fence, you can be in trouble. And I honestly say, this has got to be the biggest load of nonsense ever, and you have no one to blame. The population, there's no one to blame but themselves for the sorry state of affairs. When you buy a home in a subdivision, it's one thing to buy into a homeowners association for the benefits of upkeep and keeping properties looking nice so that you ensure resale value and the overall quality and aesthetics of the neighborhood. But when you start allowing homeowners associations to dictate not only the trees and the shrubs that you plant, but the very colors of the things that you plant, you have to understand the idiocy of that and see how you have sold yourself short in every single sense of the word. So as you're driving around and you're looking, identify those areas that would be superb locations for citrus trees. I mean, there's a variety of lemons, a variety of oranges. You don't have to live in Florida to grow oranges. There are plenty of areas in other parts of the country where if they're in a protected spot, you can achieve amazing results with citrus. So clearly I'm not a fan of homeowners associations. And just remember that even if you live in an environment where your homeowners association dictates the everything about where you live, it's possible for you to get together with a group of like-minded residents of the neighborhood and petition to have the rules amended, because never was there a better time to amend no growing your own food rules than at this time in our collective history. And then you can incorporate your move towards independence with like-minded people in your neighborhood, because remember, for instance, citrus is only going to grow against a wall in a very warm area, and you might only have one very small space like that, but another neighbor may have an area that is exclusively that. So, but then perhaps there's something that they can't grow. They don't have place for an apple tree. So if you brainstorm with your neighbors, it's possible to grow quite an abundance of food across just a few houses even in a neighborhood, which can be a boon for you and a win-win for them too. When it comes to apartment buildings, you can talk to other people that live in the apartment buildings with you and then approach firstly the manager of the apartment building and then write a letter to the owner and get this ball moving, because if you all work together in an apartment building, it would not take very long to redefine and re-landscape all the surrounding land around an apartment building to include all sorts of edibles. They can be covered with tunnels for the winter. And so that brings us to tunnels. So that's, and again, lots of YouTube videos on tunnels. It's a form that can be made out of bamboo. It can be made out of PVC piping, and it's covered with greenhouse plastic. It can also be covered with shade cloth to protect it from direct sunlight during the heat of summer, depending on what you're growing there. So those are a really good option for apartment building areas, so that you can have maximum use of existing land around the apartment. And don't forget, if you have a balcony, there's a lot of things you can grow on a balcony in pots, and you can stack pots too. So if you have like a couple wine barrels, and you leave a little space between the two wine barrels, then they can actually be the footer for the next container, just a few sizes smaller, and you can really maximize your space. You can put shelves up on the wall, and actually know someone who's got a mini aquaponic system out on his patio, which isn't barely big enough for a bistro table and 2 chairs, but he has an entire aquaponic system over there, and he's closed it in with greenhouse plastic so that it's year-round, and it functions quite adequately for him. Now, you can put in an aquaponic system in your garage, but for that you're going to have to consider some lighting. So you're either going to have to put it at a window, if you're blessed to have a very large window in your garage, or you can choose to put in a very large window in your garage. And if you're going to do that, I highly recommend that you put in the sliding door, because that way you'll have easy access for in and out, and just really, it'll be a boon to your life, I assure you. If you decide that that's not the best option for you, you could also put in a skylight. There are many different ones to choose from, and you will make back the cost of what it's going to cost you to do that, either putting in a skylight or even a slider in your garage, by the cutting down on expenses of having to go to the store and buy food, and in buying the produce itself. The boon of growing your own food, I mean, it's really, it's like growing your own money, because, and the health consequences of, or the health benefits of growing your own food are just phenomenal. You decrease your exposure to chemicals and pesticides. You know the provenance of your food, so you know that the food hasn't been drenched in all sorts of feedlot farming sewage. You know exactly what chemicals have been used, and it's hopefully only going to be fish foods and things of that nature. And the sheer quality of it, the phytonutrients and everything about it, are just going to be so much better. Plus, you're also going to be picking as you need. And there is nothing like going out to your system with your salad bowl, with your colander even, and picking the things that you need for a salad, and then going inside, rinsing them off, and bada bing, there you have, your salad is ready. Add to that, you can send the kids outside to go fishing, and that's one of the greatest things ever on a day when you get your pan out, and you've got everything set to go, and you tell the kids, go and catch a fish, clean it, bring it inside, let's eat. And so let's talk about kids in this environment. You know, as you move towards a life of independence, you realize a few empirical truths, that there is nothing that goes on in the home that's related to self-sustainment that isn't a teaching experience for children. And I urge you to get your kids involved, no matter what their ages are, because these are lessons that they learn that stay with them pretty much forever. Once you've bought your seeds, and of course you're going to make sure that they are not GMO seeds and not coated in any kinds of chemicals. A dead giveaway is if you open the seed packet and they've got a blue or a green tinge to them. Take them back to the store and ask for your money back. You can go online and have a look. There's lots of seed places that sell heirloom seed, open pollination heirloom seed. And those are definitely the ones that you want to stick with, because those are the ones there where you can harvest the seed year after year or season after season, and then replant them. So talking about replanting, I'm kind of running out of time here. So I wanted to just point out that when you seed your own stuff, you can seed it into plastic yogurt containers with some soil, and then put them in a sunny window. And you can even buy a heating pad to do it, since you're still on the grid. If you weren't on the grid, you would have to dig a shallow hole, probably about 6 inches deep, and line it with leaves and so on, and then put a cold frame over it with your little seedlings or seeds that you've planted, and mist them, keep them damp but not overly damp, and allow them to be geothermally kept warm until they have a set of true leaves. And then you can take them, and you're going to make the same little pockets of moss and charcoal in some pantyhose, and pop them into your aquaponic system. The other thing to talk about, as I'm running out of time, is to remember that when you're growing your own food, you're also going to be, or should be, looking at botanicals, at herbal plants. And herbs are an interesting thing because on the one hand, they absolutely are flavorings and spices for your food, but there comes a point where at a certain volume of ingestion, they become medicine. And so next week I'll focus more exclusively on the herbals that are used to flavor foods and their medicinal properties, and most likely I'll be able to touch on some of the tinctures and that kind of stuff that you should also be looking at, because those are things that you're going to eat, those are things that you're going to dry, those are things that you're going to ground up and put into glass jars to use as teas, to ultimately use as a poultice for a wound, for a boil, for an infection. The possibilities are endless, and the more you stick to the more natural things, the less you're going to be driving off to go to the store and spending money on gas and ingesting chemicals. What can I say? I am not a proponent of chemicals in any way, shape or form, and without our consent we are inundated with these things from everywhere. So on that note, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next week with some more. You can contact me directly, canarychronicles@outlook.com. Again, thank you, and we'll see you next week.
The Stop Watching Us Coalition posted this video on YouTube with support from politicians, actors, and civil rights advocates.
In the surveillance state, democracy itself is dead.
It makes a mockery of our system of government, which is based on the notion of independent branches of government, including a fourth estate, the press.
A free society should not have secret laws.
It doesn't have to present this false trade-off between security or privacy.
We need to bring NSA activity from the shadows into the light of day.
We need to end mass, suspicionless surveillance.
For more news, visit youtube.com/CapeMine2.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.